Hello. Settle in comfortably, wrap yourself up warmly, and let the gentle whisper of stories carry you into a deep, peaceful sleep. The pre-dawn chill of a 13th century English winter bites sharply, a stark contrast to the acrid, earthy aroma that permeates the stable. For a squire, typically a boy aged between 7 and 14, this pungent mixture of horse manure, damp straw, and unwashed animal hides marked the beginning of every day. This immediate sensory assault was not merely unpleasant. It was a constant reminder of their humble yet crucial position within the feudal hierarchy. Life as a squire, documented through medieval chronicles, household accounts, and even legal texts, was one of rigorous training and incessant labour. A squire typically began his service around the age of 7, leaving his family to join the household of a knight or lord. This wasn't merely an apprenticeship, it was a complete immersion into the noble culture, encompassing military, social, and spiritual education. Initial duties often centered on the stable, mucking out stalls, grooming war horses, and preparing feed. These tasks, while seemingly menial, fostered discipline, responsibility, and an intimate understanding of the animals that would one day carry them into battle. A destrier, the powerful war horse favored by knights, could cost as much as a small village, its care paramount. Expert analysis of period texts, such as L'Art de Chevalerie by Jean de Meun, reveals the meticulous attention paid to equine welfare. Squires learned to identify signs of lameness, colic, and other common ailments, often under the strict supervision of the stable master. Beyond the stable, the young squire's day progressed, mirroring the knight's own routine. From attending mass to assisting with the knight's armour, a full suit of plate armour in the later medieval period could weigh 50 to 60 pounds. Every action was a lesson. This systematic approach ensured that by the time a squire was deemed ready for knighthood, usually in his late teens or early 20s, he possessed not only martial prowess, but also the practical skills vital for managing a knightly household and leading men. This early, foundational experience, steeped in routine and responsibility, was essential in forging the disciplined and capable warriors of the medieval age. Beyond the grit and grime of the stables, the squire's day quickly escalated in expectations, a demanding schedule designed to mould a boy into a knight. The longing for the sword, not just as a weapon, but as a symbol of status and purpose, was a constant undercurrent in their demanding daily lives. Historical records, such as the Book of the Order of Chivalry by Ramon Lull, emphasize the moral and martial education central to a squire's upbringing. After tending to essential stable duties, the focus shifted to skills crucial for the battlefield and noble society. Weapon training commenced early, often beginning with wooden swords and blunted lances. While direct combat instruction by the knight was common, squires also learned from experienced men-at-arms within the household. They practiced daily, honing their reflexes and strength, mastering various grip techniques, parrying and thrusting. The goal was not just proficiency, but an ingrained muscle memory that could function under the duress of actual combat. A typical squire would spend hours practicing with the longsword, spear, and dagger, sometimes wearing early forms of padded armour to accustom them to the weight and restriction. Furthermore, academic pursuits were not neglected. Squires were often taught basic literacy in Latin and their vernacular language, enabling them to read religious texts, legal documents, and chivalric romances. These stories, like those of Arthur and his knights, provided moral exemplars and instilled the ideals of honour, loyalty, and courtesy expected of a true knight. Learning to ride with skill and precision, often bareback before graduating to saddle, was another critical component. They were taught to handle a horse not just in parade, but in difficult terrains and mock charges, understanding the animal's movements as an extension of their own will. This blend of physical and intellectual conditioning was meticulously structured to ensure that by the time of their knighting ceremony, usually between the ages of 18 and 21, they were not only capable warriors, but also well-rounded members of the aristocratic class, ready to command and govern. The journey from stable hand to knight was a deliberate, arduous progression, defined by the constant weight of expectations and the powerful allure of the knighthood they strove to achieve. From the meticulous care of finely bred war horses and the precise movements of weapon drills, the medieval squire's education extended into realms seemingly distant from chivalric combat, yet foundational to its very existence. The anvil's clang and the roaring breath of the forge provided another crucial classroom, where the calloused hands of the blacksmith sculpted the very tools of knighthood. The forge, often located within the castle, bailey, or a nearby village, was a hub of activity and an essential service in any medieval community. For a squire, spending time observing and even assisting the blacksmith was not merely an idle pastime. It was an integral part of understanding military logistics and material science, albeit in a rudimentary form. Blacksmiths were not just artisans. They were skilled engineers of their time, crafting everything from horseshoe nails to intricate sword hilts, maintaining weapons and repairing armor. Records from manor accounts and military inventories frequently list payments to smiths for their services, highlighting their indispensable role. A young squire would be exposed to the metallurgy of the era, observing how iron, extracted from local bog ore or imported blooms, was heated to incandescent temperatures, hammered repeatedly to remove impurities and temper the metal, and then shaped. They would learn the difference between various types of steel, though the term steel was used more broadly than today, and understand the practicalities of blade sharpness, the weight distribution of a well-balanced axe, or the structural integrity of chainmail links. They might even be tasked with working the bellows, a physically demanding job that also taught them about airflow and heat control, critical for any forge. This hands-on, observational learning provided pragmatic insights into the raw materials and craftsmanship that underpinned their entire martial world. Understanding how a sword was forged, how a horse was shod, or how a shield was reinforced transformed a simple object into a piece of tactical and logistical knowledge, equipping the future knight with an invaluable appreciation for the tools of his trade and the skilled labor that produced them. The roaring heat of the forge, the rhythmic striking of hammers, and the pungent smell of quenching oil were more than just sensory experiences for the medieval squire. They were powerful catalysts, transforming raw materials into instruments of war, and, in a parallel process, shaping the dreams of knighthood. A squire's exposure to the forge illuminated the intricate relationship between craftsmanship and combat. They would learn not only how a sword was made, but also why specific designs were preferred. For instance, the transition from pattern-welded blades of the early medieval period to the homogeneous, uniformly hardened steel blades of the high medieval era, informed by advancements in furnace technology and metallurgy, directly impacted battlefield tactics. Squires would observe the smith tempering steel, a critical process involving controlled heating and cooling to achieve a balance of hardness and flexibility, vital for a blade that needed to hold an edge without shattering. This practical education extended to armor maintenance. They would see their knight's chainmail meticulously repaired, link by link, or the dented plates of a gauntlet painstakingly reshaped. This imparted a profound respect for the durability and protective qualities of good armor, and a keen understanding of its vulnerabilities. This tangible connection to weapon and armor production was not merely technical, it fostered a psychological bond. For a squire, witnessing the creation of a polished sword, its edges sharpened to a lethal keenness, or a shield emblazoned with their knight's heraldry, symbolized the martial glory they aspired to. The clatter of steel in the forge echoed the imagined clamor of battle, further fueling their ambition. This period of observation and minor assistance at the forge provided a powerful hands-on understanding of the physical components of war, translating the abstract concept of chivalry into the solid, practical reality of steel. Such insights were invaluable for a future knight, enabling them to evaluate the quality of their own equipment and that of an adversary, thereby shaping their tactical decisions and deepening their connection to the martial calling they so fervently sought. The rigid structures of the castle and the fiery glow of the forge were but two classrooms for the medieval squire. Beyond these walls lay the wild, unpredictable expanse of the medieval forest, its earthy aroma a constant presence, and within its depths, the swift, deadly whir of the archer's arrow introduced another critical dimension to the squire's comprehensive military education. Hunting, often conducted in the vast forests surrounding a noble's estate, was far more than a leisure activity for the medieval elite. For squires, it served as an intensive training ground, honing crucial military skills under the guise of sport. Early medieval hunting practices, described in texts like Gaston Phoebus's Livre de Chasse, highlight the multifaceted benefits. It improved horsemanship over challenging terrain, developed tracking and stalking abilities essential for reconnaissance, and fostered teamwork among the hunting party. More importantly, it sharpened weapon proficiency. While knights primarily relied on heavy lances and swords, squires were also expected to be proficient with projectile weapons, particularly the hunting bow, a precursor to the formidable English longbow. The longbow, a weapon that would revolutionize warfare in later centuries, was already a significant tool during the period of squire training. Regular practice, often supervised by the knight or a seasoned ranger, was essential to develop the strength and technique required. Historical records indicate that English monarchs, from Edward I onwards, actively encouraged archery practice among their populace. A skilled archer could loose 10 to 12 arrows per minute, each capable of piercing armor at close to medium range. Squires would learn to judge distances, compensate for wind, and understand arrow ballistics. This education in missile weaponry was not merely about hitting a target. It was about understanding range combat, a vital aspect of medieval siege warfare and battlefield tactics. The forest environment, with its varying cover and unpredictable animal movements, presented a dynamic proving ground for these skills, moving beyond static targets to more fluid, realistic scenarios, preparing the squire for the complex challenges of medieval warfare. The taut bowstring, drawn back with disciplined force, represented more than just the potential for a kill in the medieval forest. It symbolized the rigorous application of physical strength, mental focus, and tactical awareness that defined the squire's education in the art of the hunt. This practice was not merely a pastime but a crucible for forging essential military virtues. Period hunting manuals, such as the aforementioned Livre de Chasse by Gaston Phoebus, illustrate the sophisticated protocols and techniques involved. For a squire, hunting instilled crucial discipline. It demanded patience in stalking prey, an understanding of animal behavior and ecology, and the ability to move silently and strategically through varied terrain. All skills directly transferable to battlefield reconnaissance and ambush tactics. The physical demands were considerable. Long treks through dense woodlands, often carrying cumbersome equipment, built stamina and resilience. The act of drawing a war bow required immense upper body strength, with some documented draw weights for military longbows exceeding 100 pounds. Regular practice ensured that squires developed the necessary musculature, as well as the precise coordination required for accurate shots. Perhaps most importantly, hunting cultivated critical decision-making under pressure. Identifying the quarry, selecting the optimal shot angle, and executing the release with precision mimicked the split-second judgments required in combat. Furthermore, the hierarchical structure of a hunt, led by the knight or an experienced huntsman, mirrored military command structures, teaching the squire to follow orders, cooperate with others, and contribute to a collective objective. This comprehensive training regimen, combining physical conditioning, weapon proficiency, tactical thinking, and disciplined execution, ensured that the lessons learned from the rhythmic whir of the archer's arrow and the challenges of the medieval hunt were deeply ingrained. These experiences were fundamental in shaping the future knight's capability to lead, strategize, and fight effectively in the complex and often brutal theatre of medieval warfare. From the practical lessons of the forge and the strategic awareness cultivated in the hunt, the medieval squire's rigorous education found its most direct combat application in a specific, daily ritual. The training yard. Here, amidst the sting of sweat and the rhythmic thud of the wooden practice sword, the theoretical lessons of warfare transformed into embodied skill. Weapon training for squires, documented in various medieval treatises on swordsmanship and jousting, was a relentless process designed to build strength, endurance, and precise technique. These sessions, overseen by the knight, a master-at-arms, or an experienced man-at-arms, were not merely about swinging a sword. They involved a systematic curriculum. Initially, squires would use a waster's, or wooden sword, which, while blunted, still provided a tangible feel for weight and balance, reducing the risk of serious injury during early training. The wooden sword allowed for aggressive full-contact practice without the lethality of sharpened steel. The curriculum encompassed a wide array of combat disciplines. Squires learned footwork, the crucial ability to move efficiently and maintain balance in a fight. They practiced various guards, parries, cuts, and thrusts, understanding the mechanics of generating power and deflecting blows. The poleaxe, a versatile polearm, and dagger were also part of the training, recognizing the diverse array of weapons used in medieval combat. Simulated combat against the quinten, a revolving target often weighted with sandbags, helped develop aim, speed, and timing for both mounted and unmounted attacks. These constant drills, often lasting for several hours each day, built the necessary muscle memory and physical conditioning. The aim was not just to wield a weapon, but to become an extension of it, reacting instinctively to an opponent's movements. This foundational training, despite the simplicity of the wooden sword, was absolutely critical for a squire to develop the raw martial prowess that would eventually be tested on the battlefield with sharpened steel. The daily toll of practice in the medieval training yard often manifested as bruised skin, a testament to the physicality of a squire's martial education. This constant physical discomfort, however, was not a deterrent, but rather a driver in the unyielding pursuit of mastery, essential for a successful career in knighthood. The transition from wooden wasters to blunted steel weaponry marked a significant progression in a squire's training. While still designed for practice, these blunted steel swords, often heavier and with more realistic balance than their wooden counterparts, increased the intensity and risk of the sparring sessions. Treatises like those from Hans Talhofer, 15th century, demonstrate a sophisticated understanding of combat mechanics, presenting detailed instruction on specific techniques, grappling, disarming, and fighting in armor. Squires would engage in controlled sparring, often wearing padded jack armor or simple chainmail, learning to absorb blows, maintain guard, and exploit an opponent's weaknesses. This was not a chaotic flailing, but a disciplined exchange, guided by established principles of combat. Beyond individual swordplay, squires were trained in group tactics. They learned how to fight as part of a shield wall, how to coordinate attacks, and how to defend against multiple opponents. The use of the quarterstaff, renowned for its versatility, was also a common training implement, building strength, reach, and defensive capabilities. Each bruise, each ache, represented a lesson learned, a movement refined, and a resilience built. This sustained physical and mental exertion was critical. By the time a squire attained knighthood, they were expected to be not just competent fighters, but tactical thinkers, capable of leading men in battle and surviving the brutal realities of medieval warfare. The relentless, often painful process of daily training was the crucible in which fear was confronted, technique was perfected, and the unwavering pursuit of martial mastery was ingrained into the very being of the future knight. Beyond the physically demanding martial arts and the practical skills acquired, a significant, often overlooked dimension of a medieval squire's training involved a profound immersion in the religious life of the era. The chilling dampness of the castle's stone walls resonated with the constant echo of distant bells, marking the liturgical hours and weaving an undeniable spiritual fabric into their daily existence. Medieval society was fundamentally shaped by the Christian Church. For a squire, integrating into a noble household meant adopting its spiritual rhythms and observances. This was not merely a passive acceptance, but an active participation, preparing them for the religious duties and expectations of a knight. Primary sources, such as monastic chronicles and bishops' visitations, frequently attest to the pervasive influence of the Church on daily life, from the highest lord to the lowliest peasant. Squires would attend daily mass, often held in the castle chapel, participating in prayers, hymns, and sermons. They learned the Latin liturgy, understanding the significance of the sacraments and the Christian doctrines that underpinned their worldview. This religious education extended beyond formal services. Squires were often taught basic catechism and the lives of saints, providing moral exemplars and reinforcing the virtues of chivalry, courage, loyalty, and service to God and Lord. The concept of a holy warrior, later exemplified by figures in the Crusades, had deep roots in the training of aspiring knights. They were taught that their martial skills were to be used in defense of the Church, the weak, and the innocent. Understanding these theological underpinnings was crucial. It provided a moral framework for their expected role in society and on the battlefield. The constant chime of the bells, signalling matins, lauds, prime, terce, sext, nuns, vespers, and compline, served as an audible, immutable schedule, reminding the squire that even amidst the rigors of combat training, their ultimate allegiance lay with the divine. This spiritual immersion formed an integral and often profound part of their transformation from boy to knight. Beyond the structured religious observances, the austere life within the castle keep itself served as a constant lesson for the medieval squire, quietly imparting not only the realities of aristocratic living, but also the subtle whispers of strategy crucial for future leadership. These grand, yet often uncomfortable, fortresses were laboratories for understanding power and defense. Castle keeps, particularly those from the Norman period onwards, were designed for defense and command. Daily life within these formidable structures was far from luxurious for most inhabitants, including squires. Draughts permeated the great halls, heating was rudimentary, and privacy was almost non-existent, with communal living spaces being the norm. Yet, this challenging environment was itself a form of training. Squires learned to endure hardship, a vital quality for a future knight who would face prolonged sieges, arduous marches, and the discomforts of campaigning. Historical accounts and archaeological findings reveal the practicalities of castle life, the logistics of storing provisions, managing a retinue, and maintaining a defensive posture. More profoundly, the castle offered a tangible education in medieval warfare and governance. A squire, by virtue of his proximity to his knight, was privy to conversations about troop movements, supplies, and political alliances. They would witness the strategic layout of the castle, understanding the purpose of baileys, murder holes, and arrow slits. They might assist in managing the knight's personal affairs, handling correspondence, or overseeing servants, thereby gaining experience in administration and leadership. This exposure to the operational aspects of a noble household provided insights into the intricate web of feudal obligations, territorial defense, and the constant need for vigilance. The very walls of the keep, therefore, taught lessons not just of physical protection, but of strategic thinking and the complex responsibilities that awaited them, integrating the moral lessons of the church with the practicalities of power and defense. The knight, a figure synonymous with warfare, was intrinsically linked to his mount. For a medieval squire, understanding and mastering the art of horsemanship was not merely a skill, but the foundation of their future martial identity. The pungent scent of leather emanating from saddles, bridles, and harnesses was a constant olfactory reminder of the rigor of dedicated equestrian training. From a young age, well before becoming a squire, boys of noble birth were familiarized with horses. However, formal equestrian training intensified significantly during their squirehood. This was a critical component of their development, as documented in various military treatises and chivalric codes. A knight without a horse was often considered a lesser fighter, and the bond between rider and steed was paramount. Squires learned to ride bareback, developing balance and a deep intuitive connection with the animal. This progressed to riding with a saddle, and eventually riding in armor, a skill demanding immense strength and coordination. The training extended far beyond just staying on the horse. Squires were taught to control their mount with subtle rein and leg cues, to guide it through complex maneuvers, and to execute turns and stops at varying speeds. They learned how to break in young horses, care for them, and recognize signs of health or distress. Imagine a squire, perhaps 12 years old, trying to manage a powerful war horse weighing over half a ton, while simultaneously practicing with a lance or sword. This was a common training scenario. They practiced mounted combat techniques, learning to wield weapons from horseback, developing the strength to hold a heavy lance steady during a charge, and the agility to use a sword in the saddle. This comprehensive approach ensured that when a squire eventually accompanied his knight into battle, he was not only a capable fighter himself, but also a proficient horseman, a crucial asset in the mounted warfare that dominated the medieval battlefield. The disciplined relationship between man and horse, forged through countless hours of practice, was indispensable to their eventual role as a knight. The visual of a horse's breath steaming in the crisp morning air, a common sight for a medieval squire, underscored the intimate relationship developing between boy and animal. This bond of trust, forged through consistent care and shared experience, was as vital to a squire's martial success as any weapon training. For a squire, horse care was a daily, hands-on responsibility. This involved not just feeding and grooming, but also mucking out stalls, bandaging minor injuries, and recognizing the individual temperament and needs of each animal. A warhorse, often a destrier, was an incredibly valuable asset, historically costing between £40 to £100 sterling in the 13th and 14th centuries, equivalent to several years' wages for a skilled craftsman. Such an investment demanded meticulous attention. Squires would learn about different breeds, their specific characteristics, and how to maintain their peak physical condition. They practiced saddling and bridling efficiently and correctly, understanding that an ill-fitting piece of equipment could cause injury to the horse or disaster in battle. This continuous interaction fostered a deep connection between the squire and his mount. Medieval military theory, as seen in accounts from the 100 Years' War, often emphasized the importance of a well-trained, confident horse. A horse that trusted its rider would be less prone to panic in the chaos of battle, more willing to charge into enemy lines, and more responsive to commands. The squire's early training, from his initial stable duties to advanced mounted combat drills, instilled this bond. It was a symbiotic relationship. The horse provided power and mobility, while the rider supplied direction and courage. This profound understanding of their equine partners was not merely about control, but about a shared purpose. The reliability of their mounts, cultivated through consistent, trusting interaction, was often the difference between victory and defeat, survival and death, for a knight and his squire on the medieval battlefield. While the medieval squire's days were dominated by rigorous physical and martial training, a less visible but equally crucial aspect of their education unfolded in the quiet hours. The gentle scratch of a quill on parchment, illuminated by the flickering glow of a single candle, marked the often overlooked intellectual development essential for future nobility. Despite the pervasive image of the knight as purely a warrior, literacy and rudimentary education were increasingly important for the aristocratic class, particularly after the 12th century. Records from monastic schools and private tutors indicate that noble boys, including future squires, were taught basic reading, writing, and arithmetic. While not universal, this practical education was vital for managing estates, understanding feudal contracts, and participating in legal and administrative roles. Latin, the language of the church and most formal documents, was often a core subject. Learning to recognize and interpret charters, land deeds, and correspondence was a tangible skill that separated educated nobility from the illiterate masses. Expert analysis of medieval household accounts frequently reveals expenditures on wax tablets, quills, ink, and even small portable books, indicating a commitment to the squire's intellectual formation. Beyond practical literacy, squires were also exposed to the burgeoning tradition of chivalric literature. Romances depicting figures like King Arthur, Charlemagne, and the heroes of the Crusades taught moral lessons, illustrated aristocratic codes of conduct, and inspired aspirations of valor and honor. These narratives were not just entertainment. They served as powerful pedagogical tools, shaping the values and world-view of the aspiring knight. Thus, in the quiet solitude, hunched over a desk with a candle providing meager light, a squire was not merely learning to read and write, but absorbing the complex tapestry of knowledge, ethics, and cultural narratives that would equip him for command, administration, and the embodiment of an ideal that transcended mere martial prowess. The quiet struggle over parchment and the lessons derived from illuminated manuscripts underscored a profound truth. The weight of knowledge was as integral to medieval knighthood as the weight of armor. Coupled with the inspiring tales of valor, this intellectual education equipped the squire not just for fighting, but for leading, governing, and embodying the aristocratic ideal. The curriculum extended beyond mere literacy to include subjects pertinent to a knight's future responsibilities. A basic understanding of feudal law and custom was essential for resolving disputes, administering justice on his estates, and navigating the complex web of allegiances inherent in the medieval political landscape. This often involved learning about precedents, homage, fealty, and the intricacies of land tenure, as documented in legal treatises like Glanville or Bracton. Furthermore, basic accounting skills were vital for managing household finances, taxes, and resources. A knight was, after all, a landlord and an administrator as much as a warrior. Beyond these practical subjects, the stories of valor, presented through epic poems and chansons de geste, played a powerful role in character formation. Tales, such as the Song of Roland, instilled ideals of loyalty to one's lord unto death, religious devotion, and unwavering courage in the face of overwhelming odds. These narratives were carefully selected to reinforce the virtues of the chivalric code: largesse, generosity, courtoisie, courtesy, and prud'homme, wisdom and prowess. The squire was not just reading about heroes, he was being taught how to be a hero according to the standards of his time. This intellectual and ethical instruction provided the philosophical bedrock upon which all the physical and martial training rested. It imbued the future knight with a sense of purpose, a moral compass, and the understanding that his elevated status carried with it significant responsibilities for justice, governance, and the protection of his community. The weight of knowledge, thus, underpinned the very essence of knighthood, shaping not just a fighter, but a leader. Despite the comprehensive training in arms, horsemanship, and even letters, the squire's journey to knighthood was not a predetermined path of smooth progression. Instead, it was a constant gauntlet of evaluation, defined by the harsh, unremitting scrutiny of the knight and the ever-present burden of perceived imperfection. The relationship between a squire and his knight was hierarchical and demanding, mirroring the feudal structure of medieval society. The knight served not only as a military instructor, but also as a surrogate father, mentor, and judge. His authority was absolute, and his expectations were exceptionally high, reflecting the societal importance of knighthood itself. Accounts from medieval chronicles and didactic texts targeting the nobility often emphasize the knight's role in instilling discipline, honor, and martial prowess. Failure to meet these stringent standards could significantly delay or even entirely prevent a squire from attaining knighthood. This scrutiny extended to every aspect of the squire's life: his performance in weapon drills, his diligence in stable duties, his comportment at table, and his moral conduct. A lapse in attention, a poorly polished piece of armor, or a disrespectful word could result in public reprimand, extra chores, or even corporal punishment, a common disciplinary practice for youths during the medieval period. The burden of imperfection was immense. Every mistake was a potential stain on his reputation and a test of his resolve. The squire was expected to demonstrate not just skill, but an unwavering commitment to the ideals of chivalry. He was to be brave, loyal, courteous, and pious, always striving for an almost unattainable ideal. This relentless pressure was designed to forge resilient and morally upright individuals, capable of upholding the knightly code in an age where reputation and status were paramount. The knight's gaze was, therefore, a constant reminder that the path to true knighthood demanded not just physical strength, but an unwavering mental fortitude and a profound dedication to excellence in every sphere of life. The sting of reprimand was a harsh, yet common, experience for a medieval squire, a sharp reminder of the high stakes involved in their training. This public correction, often delivered by the knight himself, served not as a demotivating force, but rather to ignite a powerful drive for redemption and an unyielding commitment to improvement. Such disciplinary actions were considered an integral part of shaping the moral character and obedience expected of a knight. Medieval conduct books and educational treatises often recount examples of stringent correction for lapses in discipline, etiquette, or martial performance. A squire might be admonished for clumsiness during an armor-donning ceremony, for showing inadequate respect to a visiting noble, or for a flubbed maneuver during a jousting practice. These were not arbitrary punishments. They were designed to imprint the values of self-control, precision, and humility, qualities paramount for a knight leading men and occupying a position of authority. The psychological impact of such public censure, while potentially humiliating, was often channeled into an intensified effort for future excellence. The desire to please the knight, to prove one's worthiness, and ultimately to achieve the coveted status of knighthood, became a potent motivational tool. Squires would redouble their efforts in training, meticulously polish their lord's armor, and strive for impeccable deportment, all in an effort to demonstrate their capacity for growth and dedication. This drive for redemption wasn't merely about avoiding further punishment. It was about internalizing the knightly code and proving oneself worthy of its ideals. It transformed momentary failure into a catalyst for self-discipline and sustained effort. The sting of reprimand, therefore, was an essential, albeit uncomfortable, part of the process, ensuring that the future knight understood the gravity of his role and the relentless pursuit of perfection demanded of him, forming a crucial link in the development of character and capability. The disciplined individual training of a squire culminated in an experience designed to simulate the ultimate test: medieval warfare. Amidst the clamour of a mock battle, the tang of blood, however slight, and the carefully orchestrated chaos provided a crucial proving ground for the accumulated skills, transforming theoretical knowledge into practical combat readiness. Mock battles, or tournaments in their early forms, before they became more formalized jousting events, were integral to the knightly education, particularly from the 11th century onwards. These were not mere games, but fierce, often brutal simulations of actual warfare. Early tournaments known as mêlées could involve hundreds of armed men fighting across several square miles using blunted but heavy weapons. While the intent was not usually to kill, injuries were common and even fatalities occurred. Records from the 12th and 13th centuries detail the efforts by the church to curb the violence of these events, underscoring their intensity. For squires, participating in these mock battles, often as part of their knight's retinue, offered invaluable exposure to the dynamics of large-scale combat. They experienced the disorienting noise, the dust, the fatigue, and the fear that characterized medieval engagements. They learned to operate as part of a unit, to follow the knight's banners, and to protect their lord in a dynamic, unpredictable environment. These exercises built tactical awareness, forcing squires to make rapid decisions under pressure, to identify threats, and to exploit opportunities. The physical intensity was immense, testing their endurance and their control over heavy weaponry while mounted. They learned the true weight of their armor and the limitations it imposed, as well as the protective advantages it offered. This experience was paramount, providing a visceral understanding of the chaos of battle without the full, often fatal consequences, thereby serving as a vital bridge between training and the brutal reality of actual medieval warfare. The adrenaline surge, the rapid heart rate, and the visceral sense of danger experienced within the chaos of a mock battle delivered a profound lesson to the squire. The undeniable realization of mortality. This stark confrontation with potential harm, even in a simulated environment, was critical in shaping a warrior mentally and emotionally for their future role. These early tournaments, particularly the grand melees of the 12th century, were far from bloodless. Although weapons were often blunted, the sheer force of impacts, coupled with the weight of horses and armor, routinely led to broken bones, concussions, and severe blunt trauma. Historical accounts, such as those from chronicler Roger de Hoveden, detail the dangers, with estimates suggesting that even practiced tournaments could have casualty rates comparable to minor skirmishes. For a squire, active participation meant experiencing these risks firsthand. The sounds of heavy armored men colliding, the sight of horses rearing or falling, and the occasional injury sustained by a comrade or even oneself, served as a potent, immediate education in the brutal realities of armed conflict. This exposure instilled a form of controlled fear, forcing the squire to learn to function under pressure. It taught them the importance of vigilance, of maintaining their guard, and of trusting their training and their comrades. The adrenaline surge, while debilitating if uncontrolled, could also be harnessed. Squires learned to channel it into heightened senses and faster reactions, crucial for survival on the actual battlefield. Moreover, it fostered a deeper understanding of tactical necessity, of when to engage and when to retreat, when to press an advantage and when to defend. This confronting of mortality, albeit in a structured environment, distinguished the seasoned warrior from the mere trainee. It was in these crucible moments that self-preservation instincts were refined, courage was tested, and the true cost of warfare began to sink in, ensuring that when the time came for real combat, the future knight was as mentally prepared as physically capable. Amidst the rigorous training, the intellectual demands, and the constant threat of reprimand, a squire's daily life was also defined by a much more fundamental reality: the stark simplicity of their material existence. The rough wool of a tunic and the often unremarkable nature of their meals underscored an upbringing steeped in practicality and resilience, far removed from later romanticized notions of chivalric luxury. Documentary evidence from household accounts and sumptuary laws of the medieval period indicates that clothing for squires, even those from noble families, was functional rather than flamboyant. Tunics, hose, and mantles were typically fashioned from durable wool or linen, designed to withstand the wear and tear of physical activity. Dyes were often natural and earthy, with brighter colours reserved for their lords or for specific ceremonial occasions. This practical attire facilitated movement during weapon drills, stable work and hunting, prioritizing utility over ostentation. It normalized a degree of physical discomfort, preparing them for the realities of campaigning and life in rudimentary conditions. Similarly, the meals consumed by squires, while generally more substantial than those of the peasantry, were designed for sustenance and energy rather than culinary indulgence. While their noble master might feast on roasted game and imported spices, a squire's diet would typically consist of hearty portions of bread, pottage, a thick vegetable stew, often with legumes and grains, cheese, and ale or cider. Meat would be available, particularly after a successful hunt, but usually in more modest quantities. This diet, rich in carbohydrates and calories, provided the necessary fuel for their demanding schedule. Historical food records and archaeological finds from medieval kitchens corroborate this, indicating a reliance on seasonal produce and locally sourced ingredients. This emphasis on simplicity and practicality in both attire and diet fostered an essential resilience and self-reliance, ensuring that future knights were accustomed to robust, unfussy living. These formative experiences ingrained a pragmatism that would serve them well when enduring the inevitable hardships of military service and the realities of medieval life. Despite the basic provisions for sustenance and clothing, the squire's existence was characterized by a pervasive scarcity of comfort, forming a stark contrast with the inherent hunger for progress that drove them. This deliberate absence of luxury was a foundational element in forging resilience and determination. Living arrangements for squires within a medieval castle or manor were typically communal and Spartan. They often slept on straw pallets in shared chambers, sometimes beneath the great hall or in towers, with little personal space or privacy. Heating, primarily from central hearths, was often insufficient to ward off the biting cold of stone structures, particularly during winter. Personal hygiene was rudimentary by modern standards, with bathing an infrequent rather than daily ritual. This constant exposure to physical discomfort, cold, hard beds, lack of privacy, and basic sanitation, was not an oversight, but a purposeful aspect of their training. It accustomed them to the rigors of campaigning, where conditions would be far worse, and taught them to prioritize functional needs over personal desires. This scarcity of comfort was juxtaposed with an insatiable hunger for progress. Every task, however mundane, every lesson, however difficult, was a step towards the ultimate goal of knighthood. This ambition was reinforced by the hierarchical nature of their society. Advancement through the ranks of page, squire, and eventually knight represented a significant improvement in status, privilege, and even personal comfort. The promise of eventually owning fine clothes, enjoying more elaborate meals, and having a chamber of one's own acted as a powerful, albeit distant, motivator. Historical biographies of knights often highlight their humble beginnings as squires, underscoring the long and arduous journey to their distinguished positions. Thus, the deliberate fostering of resilience through the scarcity of comfort was strategically designed to cultivate disciplined individuals, driven by aspiration and capable of enduring hardship. This forged robust, adaptive leaders for a world that demanded both physical toughness and unwavering ambition. As the squire aged and grew in skill, his duties evolved to encompass even more direct service to his knight, particularly in the lead-up to battle or tournament. The chill of the dawn air, often accompanying the solemn preparations, highlighted the ritual of arming his lord, a critical, trust-based operation fraught with potential consequences. The act of arming a knight was not a simple matter of dressing. It was a complex and methodical ritual, demanding precision, knowledge, and efficiency. This process, often graphically depicted in medieval illuminated manuscripts and described in chivalric literature, was typically overseen by the knight's most senior squire or an experienced man-at-arms. The knight's life could literally depend on the proper fitting and securing of each piece of armor. A misplaced strap, a loose buckle, or an improperly seated plate could prove fatal in the heat of combat. The sequence of donning armor, while varying over different periods and styles, e.g., from chainmail to full plate, generally began with padded undergarments like an arming doublet or gambeson to prevent chafing and absorb impact. This was followed by the chainmail shirt, hauberk, and then the various pieces of plate armor such as pauldrons, shoulders, rear braces and vambraces, upper and lower arms, gauntlets, hands, cuisses, thighs, greaves, shins, and sabatons, feet. Finally, the helmet, often the last piece, would be secured. Each piece had to be correctly aligned, laced, buckled, or riveted into place, often weighing between 50–70 pounds for a full suit of plate armor from the 15th century. The squire had to know the function of each component, its proper attachment point, and how to make swift adjustments. This duty fostered an intimate understanding of armor mechanics and provided an unparalleled insight into their lord's physical presence and vulnerabilities. It was a testament to the trust placed in the squire, a clear indicator that he was nearing the ultimate test of his accumulated training, standing on the precipice of battle or the grand spectacle of the tournament. The culmination of the squire's meticulous arming efforts was the awe-inspiring sight of his knight, now transformed. The gleam of polished armor, reflecting the dawn's early light, was not merely aesthetic. It was a psychological weapon, a practical defense, and, for the aspiring squire, a powerful symbol of the promise of battle and the glory that might ensue. Polished armor served multiple functions beyond intimidation. A highly reflective surface, especially on plate armor, made it harder for an opponent to judge distances accurately under bright sunlight. More critically, a smooth, polished surface could help deflect blows, causing weapons to glance off rather than penetrate directly. This was a sophisticated understanding of physics applied to medieval combat. The squire's role in maintaining this gleam, through constant cleaning and oiling to prevent rust and ensure peak functionality, was therefore not just a chore, but a vital contribution to his lord's safety and combat effectiveness. Accounts from chroniclers like Jean Froissart often highlight the impressive sight of knights arrayed for battle, their arms glinting in the sun, a vision designed to inspire their own troops and demoralize the enemy. For the squire, this ritual of arming and the resulting vision of the armored knight solidified the abstract ideals of chivalry into a tangible, powerful presence. Observing his knight, fully equipped, sword at side, shield ready, presented a vivid tableau of the warrior ideal he himself strove to embody. It reinforced the lessons learned from the tournament field, the forge, and the training yard. The clanking of the metal, The weight of the sword passed to the knight, the donning of the helmet. Each action was steeped in meaning, signifying readiness for the ultimate test. It was in these moments that a squire truly understood the tangible reality of the warrior's path, the blend of meticulous preparation and raw courage required. This preparation for battle, with the squire as a crucial participant, was not merely mechanical. It was a deeply symbolic and psychologically charged experience, cementing his place in the martial tradition and reaffirming his own commitment to the formidable promise of knighthood. With his knight fully armoured, the next critical phase of the squire's combat education began. The arduous journey to the battlefield itself. The dust of the road, kicked up by marching feet and hooves, and the relentless rhythm of the march were not mere inconveniences, but formative experiences in military logistics, endurance, and the grim realities of campaigning. Marching, often over considerable distances and varied terrain, was a fundamental aspect of medieval warfare. While knights might ride, their squires and the bulk of the army, infantry, archers, baggage train, often travelled on foot. This meant enduring all weather conditions, from scorching sun to driving rain or snow, and navigating unimproved roads or even trackless wilderness. Chroniclers such as Edward III's campaigns during the 100 Years' War vividly described the physical toll these forced marches took on armies, with men and horses alike suffering from fatigue, hunger, and disease. For a squire, this was a harsh practical lesson in military endurance, testing his physical and mental mettle. Beyond the physical hardship, the march was a crucial logistical exercise. Squires, serving their knights, were responsible for carrying provisions, maintaining equipment on the move, and assisting with the setup of temporary camps each night. They gained first-hand knowledge of the challenges of supplying an army, including foraging for food and water, the impact of broken supply lines, and the necessity of maintaining discipline on the march to prevent straggling and desertion. The sheer scale of a medieval army on the move, even a relatively small one of a few thousand men, was immense, presenting complex organizational challenges. By observing and participating in these daily operations, the squire absorbed an invaluable understanding of field logistics, reconnaissance duties, and the vital role of discipline in maintaining unit cohesion across long distances. This pragmatic education, far removed from the glory of battle, was essential for any future commander, underscoring that victory was often won not just by valor on the battlefield, but by meticulous planning and enduring the relentless grind of the campaign trail. The weariness of travel, a constant companion on the medieval campaign, forged an unexpected yet crucial element in the squire's development: the unbreakable camaraderie of the company. Sharing hardships on the march built bonds that transcended rank, preparing the future knight for the essential collaborative nature of warfare. Despite the obvious hierarchy on campaign, the shared experience of enduring logistical challenges, physical discomfort, and the ever-present threat of enemy action fostered deep connections among the squires and men-at-arms in a knight's retinue. Historical records, such as chronicles detailing military expeditions, frequently note the tight-knit nature of these companies. These were not just professional units. They were often extended households, bound by loyalty, shared purpose, and proximity. Squires would sleep shoulder to shoulder, share limited rations, and rely on each other for assistance with equipment, navigation, and even moral support during long and difficult marches. This camaraderie was vital for operational effectiveness. In battle, a knight relied heavily on his squire and his immediate retinue for protection, communication, and swift assistance. a squire would tend to his lord's second horse, carry his shield, retrieve fallen weapons, and even assist him if unhorsed or wounded. This level of interdependence demanded absolute trust and cohesion, which was cultivated on the march. The shared jokes, gripes, and moments of relief forged a collective identity that was critical when facing the disorienting chaos of combat. It taught the squire the value of teamwork, loyalty both up and down the chain of command, and the psychological strength derived from fighting alongside familiar, trusted faces. This deep-seated camaraderie, born from shared adversity, was therefore not merely a pleasant byproduct of campaign life, but a fundamental building block for military effectiveness, ensuring that the future knight understood the profound importance of his companions and the collective strength of his company. Beyond the grim realities of the campaign trail, another vital arena for a squire's development lay in the vibrant spectacle of the tournament. The roar of the crowd, the shimmering silk banners, and the thunder of hooves combined to create a dazzling display that, while often stylized, served as a crucial proving ground for chivalric values, martial prowess, and social standing. Tournaments, particularly from the 12th century onwards, evolved from the chaotic melee into more formalized events, most notably the joust. These events, documented meticulously by chroniclers like Jean Froissart and in heraldic records, were not mere entertainment. They were highly ritualized military exercises designed to train knights for war, display their fighting skills, and reinforce social hierarchies. For a squire, attendance and participation were paramount. He would serve his knight by carrying his lance and shield, overseeing his harness, and assisting in the precise preparations for each pass. This close proximity allowed the squire to observe technique, anticipate commands, and learn the subtle strategies of the joust from his lord's direct example. The spectacle itself was a masterclass in noble conduct and martial display. Squires would witness the chivalric etiquette of challenges, the meticulous inspections of armor, and the ceremonial processions of knights. They observed the controlled aggression, the display of horsemanship, and the powerful impact of lance-striking shield. These events, often drawing large crowds from all social strata, provided tangible examples of the martial ideals they had studied. Success in the tournament brought not just honor and material rewards to the knight, but also prestige to his entire retinue. For an aspiring squire, the tournament offered a tantalizing glimpse into the glory and recognition that awaited a successful knight, reinforcing the value of their arduous training and kindling aspirations for their own future participation in such grand displays of martial skill. Within the vibrant pageantry of the medieval tournament, even as the thrill of competition electrified the air, there were profound lessons for the squire to internalize. Beyond the pursuit of victory, the true measure of a knight, and thus a future knight, lay in the dignity with which one accepted setbacks, embodying the often demanding code of sportsmanship inherent in chivalry. Tournaments, particularly jousts, were dangerous endeavors. While the spectacle aimed for controlled combat, serious injuries and even fatalities were not uncommon. Despite the use of specialized lances de guerre, designed to splinter rather than pierce, the thrill of competition was undeniable. A successful tilt, breaking lances and unhorsing an opponent, brought immense glory and valuable prizes, often the opponent's horse and armor. For a squire, witnessing a knight's triumph was inspiring, reinforcing the efficacy of their shared training. Yet, equally important were the moments of defeat. A knight unhorsed or forced to yield faced a choice: to succumb to anger and dishonor, or to display courtoisie, courtesy, and dignity in his loss. This aspect was meticulously observed and absorbed by squires. They saw lessons in resilience, in analysing failure, and in maintaining one's honour even when bested. The chivalric code, often romanticised, placed significant emphasis on honourable conduct, both in victory and defeat. A knight might be praised not only for his prowess, but also for his grace in accepting defeat, acknowledging a superior opponent, or offering aid to a fallen foe. Such acts, recorded in works like Le Jouvencel by Jean de Bay, served as practical examples of the moral conduct expected of the nobility. For the squire, this provided a vital counterpoint to the relentless pursuit of martial victory. It taught that true strength was not solely about winning, but about how one conducted oneself under all circumstances. Thus, the tournaments, with their blend of fierce competition and prescribed conduct, served as powerful ethical classrooms, preparing squires to navigate the complexities of both triumph and adversity with the honour and dignity befitting a knight. While much of the squire's training focused on projecting strength and honour, there was a darker, yet equally formative aspect to their education: the grim reality of capture and imprisonment. The gloom of the dungeon and the visible despair of the captive served as a visceral lesson in the dire consequences of warfare and the complex economics of ransom. Capture was a significant threat in medieval warfare, especially for knights and high-ranking nobles. Unlike common soldiers, who might be simply killed, a knight was a valuable asset, representing a substantial economic investment. The concept of ransom, where a prisoner was held for monetary payment or political concessions, was deeply ingrained in the chivalric code and military practice from the 12th century onwards. Treatises like The Book of Chivalry by Geoffroy de Charny discuss the honourable conduct of both captor and captive, emphasising strict adherence to agreements. Squires, by necessity, would have been acutely aware of this practice. They might observe captured knights or nobles held within the very castle they served, or in some cases, act as guards or messengers to negotiate ransoms. The experience of witnessing a captive's despair, often held in cold, damp, and uncomfortable conditions in a dungeon or tower, provided a stark lesson in humility and the transient nature of power. It underscored the brutal consequences of defeat and the potential loss of freedom. Records from the 100 Years' War and other conflicts are replete with examples of powerful lords and even kings being held for ransom, highlighting the tangible vulnerability of even the most formidable warrior. The monetary value of a knight could be immense, sometimes equivalent to several years of a lord's income, leading to protracted negotiations and the selling of lands or titles to secure release. For the squire, this provided an intimate, sobering understanding of the high stakes involved in battle. It reinforced the importance of fighting skillfully and honourably, not just for victory, but also for personal survival and the preservation of one's family wealth and honour. The dungeon, therefore, was not merely a physical space, but a grim classroom, teaching the squire the difficult truths about the financial and personal costs of defeat in medieval combat. Beyond the immediate discomfort and despair of a captive's holding, the squire was exposed to the broader, harsh realities of war and the often exorbitant cost of chivalry. This understanding was vital, moving beyond theoretical ideals to the concrete sacrifices demanded by a life of arms. The institution of ransom, while offering a chance at survival for captured nobles, also represented a significant financial burden. The family of a captured knight would often have to mortgage lands, sell heirlooms, or incur massive debts to gather the ransom payment. This financial strain could cripple a family for generations, impacting their social standing and long-term economic stability. Case studies from the 100 Years' War, such as the capture of King John II of France at the Battle of Poitiers in 1356, whose ransom nearly bankrupted France, illustrate the immense scale of these costs. Squires, being intimately involved in the knight's household and often his personal affairs, would have been acutely aware of these financial repercussions, serving as a stark reminder that even survival in medieval warfare came at a profound price. Furthermore, the squire would witness the physical and psychological scars left by conflict. Soldiers returning from campaigns, even victorious ones, often bore injuries, crippling wounds, lost limbs, chronic pain that would affect them for life in a society without modern medicine. The psychological trauma, though not recognized as such at the time, would also be evident in the hardened demeanor of veterans. This tangible exposure moved the squire beyond the idealized narratives of valor and honor to the brutal truth of bodily mutilation and mental anguish that was the frequent consequence of battle. This deeper understanding was crucial. It tempered the romantic notions of chivalry with a grounding in its practical and often painful price. By observing both the despair of the captive and the long-term suffering of returning warriors, the squire began to grasp that the honor and glory of knighthood were hard-won, often at tremendous personal and familial expense, making the pursuit of mastery not just an ambition, but a solemn and costly commitment. In the shadow of the harsh realities of medieval warfare, another crucial aspect of life, and the squire's education, emerged: the vital, often understated role of medieval medicine. The soothing balm of herbs and the quiet, focused work of the healer offered a counterpoint to the battlefield's brutality, providing practical lessons in care and survival. Medieval medicine, while lacking modern scientific understanding, was a blend of empirical knowledge, herbal remedies, and sometimes surgical intervention. For a squire, knowledge of basic first aid and common medicinal practices was not optional. It was a matter of survival, both for himself and for his knight. Castles and larger noble households typically had a designated barber surgeon, or an experienced woman, often the lady of the castle, who acted as a primary healer, possessing knowledge passed down through generations. Records from monastic infirmaries and household accounts detail the cultivation of medicinal gardens where plants like comfrey for bone mending, plantain for wounds, and chamomile for calming were grown. Squires would learn the properties of various herbs, how to prepare poultices and salves, and how to apply rudimentary bandages. They would observe the treatment of common ailments, from infections and fevers to broken bones and battle wounds. While complex surgery was typically beyond a squire's training, understanding the immediate steps needed to staunch bleeding, immobilize a limb, or clean a wound could be life-saving. After a battle or a particularly brutal tournament, the squire would often assist in caring for the wounded, both men and horses, under the guidance of the healer. This hands-on experience, often dealing with significant pain and suffering, fostered a practical understanding of anatomy, hygiene, as understood at the time, and the limits of medical intervention. This not only broadened their skill set beyond combat, but imbued them with a sense of empathy and responsibility for the well-being of their comrades, a crucial leadership quality for a future knight. The quiet work of the healer, therefore, taught critical lessons that complemented their martial training, preparing them for the comprehensive demands of medieval life and warfare, where both inflicting and healing injury were stark realities. Observing the quiet work of the healer, a squire was not merely learning practical skills. He was confronting the profound fragility of life and the ever-present hope for recovery in an era where death was a constant shadow. This stark lesson was central to understanding the true cost and value of life, especially in a military context. Medieval warfare, whether in pitched battles, sieges, or even tournaments, produced horrific injuries. Weapons designed for cutting, piercing, and crushing inflicted devastating wounds. Infections, without the understanding of germ theory, were rampant and often fatal. A simple graze could turn septic and lead to death. Squires would routinely witness these realities. Men suffering from arrow wounds, sword cuts, or fractured limbs. The best medical care available, often administered by barber surgeons whose expertise came from practical experience rather than formal training, involved painful and often crude procedures like cauterization for severe bleeding, trepanning for head wounds, or amputation for gangrenous limbs. Surviving military manuals and medical texts, such as those by Roger of Salerno or Henri de Mondeville, detail these interventions, underscoring their invasive nature and limited success rates. Despite the grim outlook, there was always hope for recovery. This hope was fueled by the healer's skill, the patient's constitution, and deep religious faith. Squires would observe the painstaking process of wound dressing, the careful administration of herbal concoctions, and the fervent prayers offered for the sick and injured. This reinforced the idea that life, though fragile, was precious, and that every effort should be made to preserve it. For a future knight, understanding the full impact of an injury, not just its immediate pain, but its long-term debilitating effects, or even lethality, was crucial for developing tactical judgment and leading responsibly. It instilled a balanced perspective. While a knight was expected to be brave and willing to face death, he was also responsible for the lives of his men and the preservation of his own combat effectiveness. This intimate exposure to the fragility of life and the arduous path to recovery provided the squire with an invaluable, humanizing perspective on the consequences of the martial life he was being trained to lead. Amidst the harsh lessons of warfare and the practicalities of medieval life, the squire's journey was also deeply intertwined with the spiritual realm. The sacred hush of the chapel, often a central feature of any noble dwelling, provided not only a place of mandatory religious observance, but also a profound source of personal comfort and spiritual grounding through prayer. Medieval society was profoundly shaped by Christian theology, and the church permeated every aspect of daily life. For a squire, regular attendance at Mass and participation in daily prayers were not merely optional activities, but core requirements of their upbringing, and a demonstration of piety, a key chivalric virtue. Records from monastic chronicles and religious treatises emphasize the ubiquitous presence of faith. Squires would learn the liturgy, often in Latin, gradually understanding the rituals and their theological significance. They would be exposed to the stories of saints, martyrs, and biblical figures, which provided moral exemplars and reinforced a worldview where faith, valor, and divine will were inextricably linked. The chapel, even in its simplicity, offered a sanctuary from the relentless demands of physical training, the political machinations of the court, or the grim realities of war. Here, in the quiet solitude or communal worship, squires found an opportunity for introspection and spiritual replenishment. Prayer, whether structured liturgical prayer or personal devotion, provided a means to cope with fear, to express gratitude, or to seek guidance. The comfort of prayer was not just an abstract concept, it was a practical tool for mental fortitude, especially for individuals whose lives were perpetually on the brink of violence and uncertainty. This spiritual training was as vital as their martial instruction. It instilled a moral code, a sense of divine purpose, and a source of inner strength that enabled them to face extreme challenges. The sacred hush of the chapel, therefore, was not merely a backdrop for their daily routine. It was a deeply ingrained component of their education, shaping their inner lives and preparing them for the complex spiritual and ethical demands of knighthood. Beyond the comfort prayer offered, the squire's spiritual education was a profound immersion in the power of faith, inextricably linked to a deep understanding and fear of the weight of sin. This dual perspective shaped a moral compass crucial for a knight, whose actions carried not only earthly consequences but eternal implications. A knight's life by its very nature involved violence, a direct contradiction to Christian teachings. This paradox was addressed through concepts like just war theory, developed by theologians like Augustine and Aquinas, which defined conditions under which warfare could be morally permissible. Squires, through sermons and instruction, would learn these justifications, understanding their role as divinely sanctioned protectors of the innocent and defenders of the faith. However, they were also constantly reminded of the 7 deadly sins: pride, envy, wrath, sloth, avarice, gluttony, and lust, and the constant spiritual battle an individual faced. Wrath, in particular, a dangerous propensity for a warrior, required careful spiritual management. Confession and penance were regular practices, offering a path to absolution and reconciliation with God. The fear of eternal damnation, a palpable reality for medieval people, provided a powerful incentive for righteous conduct. This informed the chivalric code, which, while secular in many aspects, was deeply influenced by Christian ethics, promoting virtues such as charity, humility, and justice. Primary sources, such as the Pèlerinage de vie humaine by Guillaume de Digouleville, illustrate the allegorical journey of life as a spiritual struggle against sin. For a squire, this constant spiritual awareness was not an abstract theological concept, but a lived reality. It impacted how they conducted themselves in battle, how they treated captives, and how they governed their daily lives. The power of faith offered hope and guidance, while the weight of sin cautioned against excess and injustice. This complex interplay of spiritual belief and martial duty formed the unbreakable core of the medieval knight's identity, ensuring that even amidst the brutality of their profession, they were constantly reminded of their moral obligations and their ultimate accountability to a higher power. Amidst the demanding daily routine, the spiritual introspection, and the constant preparation for conflict, there were also moments of respite and communal celebration for the medieval squire. The festive din of the great hall, particularly during special occasions, offered a vibrant stage for social learning, bathed in the comforting warmth of a roaring fire. The great hall served as the heart of any medieval castle or manor, functioning as a dining room, reception area, administrative centre, and often a sleeping quarter for many of the household. While everyday meals might be relatively subdued, feasts and celebrations, marking religious holidays, victorious returns from campaign, or important visits, transformed the hall into a place of lively social interaction. Records from household accounts often detail the lavish preparations for such events, including increased provisions of meat, fine wines, and special entertainment. For a squire, these gatherings were invaluable lessons in courtly etiquette and social hierarchy. He observed how his lord interacted with high-ranking guests, how favours were granted, and how alliances were subtly forged or broken. While serving at table, carrying platters of food or pouring wine, the squire honed his manners, learned the intricate dance of social graces, and listened to conversations that often touched upon politics, strategy, and the latest news from distant lands. This immersive experience was crucial for understanding the broader political and social landscape he would eventually inherit. The warmth of the fire, both literal and symbolic, fostered a sense of belonging and community, tempering the harsh realities of their training. It was here that bards might recite epic poems of chivalry, reinforcing the ideals of knighthood, or musicians might play, providing entertainment and a sense of shared joy. These moments of festivity were not merely about indulgence. They were carefully orchestrated events designed to reinforce social bonds, display wealth and power, and provide crucial informal education in the complex tapestry of medieval aristocratic life. For the squire, it was an essential complement to his martial and intellectual training, preparing him for the social responsibilities that accompanied his future status as a knight. Beyond the structured lessons and formal duties, the squire's journey was also profoundly shaped by the raw, unfiltered emotions of communal living. The laughter and the sorrow of a shared life, experienced within the close quarters of a medieval household, provided invaluable human lessons for the future leader. Life in a medieval castle was inherently communal. Privacy, as understood today, was almost non-existent. Squires lived, ate, and often slept in proximity to fellow household members, from the highest-ranking nobles to the lowest servants. This constant interaction meant exposure to the full spectrum of human emotion. They witnessed the joyous celebrations of births and marriages, the boisterous camaraderie of feasts with minstrels and jesters, and the simple pleasures of storytelling around the hearth. These moments of laughter and communal joy fostered a sense of belonging and taught them the importance of morale and social cohesion within a group, qualities essential for a military commander. Conversely, they also experienced profound sorrow. Death, a constant presence in medieval life, whether from illness, accident, or battle, brought with it public mourning rituals observed by the entire household. The departure of a knight for campaign, laden with uncertainty, would also be a time of solemnity. Squires would see the grief of widows, the anxiety of awaiting news, and the stark reality of loss. These shared experiences of sorrow, while painful, instilled empathy and a deeper understanding of human vulnerability. They learned how a community supported its members in times of hardship and how leaders were expected to comfort and inspire even in adversity. This emotional education was crucial. It taught them that while a knight must be brave and resolute, he was also a human being leading other human beings. The laughter built bonds, and the sorrow taught compassion and resilience, both vital attributes for effective leadership in an age when a knight commanded deeply personal loyalties. This complex emotional tapestry of shared life ultimately rounded out the squire's education, transforming him from a skilled warrior into a wise and empathetic leader, capable of navigating the full emotional landscape of his future domain. The shared laughter and sorrow of medieval household life were often punctuated by an even more profound, stark emotion, the bitterness of loss. For a squire, witnessing the solemnity of a funeral, especially for a fallen knight or a valued member of the household, served as a potent, unavoidable lesson in the ultimate cost of their chosen path and the transient nature of earthly life. Death was an ever-present reality in the medieval world. with high mortality rates from disease, childbirth, and certainly warfare. Funerals were not private affairs but communal events, often elaborate and deeply ritualistic, reflecting both the deceased's social status and the community's spiritual beliefs. For a fallen knight, the funeral rites would be particularly significant, often involving a procession with his coat of arms, a vigil in the chapel, and a requiem mass. Chroniclers and heraldic records frequently describe these ceremonies, detailing the involvement of the entire household. Squires would participate in these rituals, perhaps carrying banners, holding candles, or assisting with the preparation of the body or burial site. This direct exposure to death, far from abstract, instilled a deep appreciation for the fragility of human existence. The bitterness of loss, particularly for a knight with whom a squire had formed a strong bond, served as a powerful reminder of the ultimate sacrifice that might be demanded. It also underscored the responsibility inherent in their martial training. A knight's life was not to be thrown away carelessly. This lesson transcended the battlefield. It extended to the value of human life within the community. Funerals provided a context for contemplation, reinforcing the religious teachings about the afterlife and the spiritual implications of one's actions. The solemnity of the occasion further cemented the knightly virtues of piety and devotion. For a squire, these experiences imprinted a profound understanding of mortality and the sacred duty associated with defending life and upholding justice, even at the risk of their own. It was a sobering yet vital component of their education, preparing them not just for fighting, but for leading a life that respected its own brevity and honored the memory of those who had fallen. Witnessing the solemn rituals of a medieval funeral, the squire was initiated into a profound truth: the unending cycle of life and death, and the enduring importance of memory to honor the fallen. This understanding became a cornerstone of his education, weaving historical consciousness into his personal sense of purpose. In medieval society, memory was not merely a personal recollection, but a communal and dynastic responsibility. The memory of the fallen, particularly knights who had died honorably in service, was meticulously preserved through various means. Effigies on tombs, memorial masses, and the recording of lineages and heroic deeds in chronicles and family histories all served to keep alive the legacy of the deceased. For a squire, this meant hearing tales of ancestors and other honored knights, their courage and sacrifices serving as both inspiration and a benchmark for his own conduct. He would understand that his actions, too, would one day become part of this ongoing narrative, influencing how he would be remembered. This cyclical understanding of life, death, and remembrance resonated deeply within the feudal system. New squires replaced fallen ones. New knights took up the mantle of those who had passed, ensuring the continuity of the noble lineage and the martial tradition. This was not a philosophy of despair, but one of purpose and continuity. It instilled in the squire a sense of his place within a long and distinguished heritage, obligating him to uphold the standards of those who came before him. He learned that while individual lives were finite, the honor and duty associated with knighthood were perennial, passed down through generations. This historical consciousness of being part of an unbroken chain of warriors and leaders provided a powerful motivation. It shaped his drive to excel, to live honorably, and to face challenges with courage, knowing that his own life and choices would contribute to the collective memory of his house and the broader chivalric ideal. Thus, the memory of the fallen, sustained through ritual and narrative, served as a powerful, ever-present teacher, guiding the squire towards a life of purpose and enduring legacy. After years, sometimes a decade or more, of relentless training, unwavering service, and profound emotional and spiritual development, the moment approached. The squire, now a young man typically between 18 and 21 years of age, stood on the precipice of knighthood. The culmination of this arduous journey was realized in the weight of the sword in hand, a physical manifestation of his new status and the taste of a hard-won freedom. The ceremony of dubbing a knight, while varying in its specific rituals over time and region, was a profoundly symbolic event. Often, it would occur on the eve of a battle or after a significant martial achievement, or during a grand occasion in the presence of his lord, a king, or a high-ranking noble. Historical accounts detail these rituals, emphasizing their solemnity and the transformation they represented. No longer a mere squire, the aspiring knight would undergo a night-long vigil of prayer, bathing, and confession, symbolizing purification and dedication. This spiritual preparation underscored the sacred duties of knighthood. The morning of the ceremony, typically before an assembly of witnesses, would see the presentation of the knight-to-be. His spurs would be fastened, and his sword, which might be a new, finely crafted weapon or a cherished family heirloom, would be girded upon him. The defining moment was the accolade, a blow, usually a flat slap of the hand, or a tap with a sword on the shoulder or neck, delivered by the lord performing the dubbing. While sometimes referred to as knight-errant, the newly created knight was now a Miles, a soldier, a warrior, bound by a complex set of oaths and allegiances. The words accompanying this action, "Be brave, be resolute, and be worthy," encapsulated the expectations of his new station. The literal weight of the sword, now his own, was a tangible symbol of his newfound authority, responsibility, and the right to wield lethal force in defense of faith, lord, and community. This freedom was not one of unbound liberty, but of a purposeful agency, the independence to lead, to command, and to uphold the very ideals he had so diligently trained for. The moment of the accolade, while signifying the culmination of years of arduous training, was more than a mere bestowal of status. It was a transformation, an anointing, that accompanied the literal weight of the sword with the profound and complex burden of knighthood itself, a weight that transcended the physical. The ceremony of dubbing was deeply religious, particularly from the 12th century onwards. The sword, often blessed by a priest, symbolized divine justice. The knight himself swore intricate oaths, placing his hands in his lord's to signify homage and fealty. Chronicles and ordains, liturgical texts for ceremonies, provide detailed accounts of these profound pledges. He vowed to defend the church, protect the weak, uphold justice, and remain loyal to his lord. This anointing, often accompanied by oil blessed by the church, conferred upon the new knight a sacred aura, elevating him to a chosen defender of a Christian society. He was, in essence, becoming a Miles Christi, a soldier of Christ, bound by divine as well as feudal responsibilities. This burden of knighthood was multifaceted. Militarily, he was expected to answer his lord's summons, maintain his equipment, and lead his own retinue into battle. His martial prowess had to be unquestionable, serving as an example for his men. Socially, he was expected to embody the chivalric ideal, chaste, at least in public, courteous, generous, and honorable. His conduct reflected not just upon himself, but upon his lord and his family. Economically, maintaining the status of a knight was expensive. a knight needed to support his household, staff, horses, and armor, costs that could be prohibitive for those without inherited wealth. Many sought service with wealthier lords, fought as mercenaries, or engaged in ransoming captives to sustain their position. This complex web of expectations, spiritual, military, social, and economic, constituted the true burden of knighthood. It was a life of privilege, certainly, but also one of immense responsibility, constant peril, and relentless moral and physical demands. The squire's journey concluded not with an end to responsibilities, but with their profound amplification, for he was now officially tasked with upholding the very fabric of medieval society, a formidable duty forged in nearly 2 decades of rigorous preparation. With the accolade delivered and the oath sworn, the former squire now stood as a knight. His long education complete, the horizon now beckoned, promising a path of new journeys, challenges, and the profound responsibilities that came with his newly attained status. The newly dubbed knight faced a myriad of choices for his future. For many, particularly those with inherited land, the path involved returning to their ancestral estates to manage their holdings and serve as local lords, administering justice and participating in regional governance. Records from manorial courts and feudal registers confirm this common trajectory, as knights became pillars of their local communities. They would raise and lead men for their overlord when summoned, maintaining their martial skills through hunting and occasional skirmishes. This option offered stability and the opportunity to build a family legacy. However, for knights from poorer families, or those seeking glory and adventure, the path often led to a life of itinerant service. Many sought employment in the retinues of wealthier lords, kings, or even foreign monarchs, offering their martial skills in exchange for wages, land grants, or reputation. The 100 Years' War, for example, saw countless English and French knights traveling across Europe in search of military contracts. Others might embark on crusades, seeking spiritual merit and potentially material wealth in the Holy Land or other contested territories. Still others might pursue careers as professional tournament fighters, where success could bring considerable financial reward and fame. This mobility was a defining characteristic of medieval knighthood, particularly for those without substantial inherited wealth. The choice of path was not merely a personal one. It was deeply intertwined with social obligation, economic necessity, and the pervasive ideals of chivalry and individual ambition. The formative years as a squire had prepared him for these diverse possibilities, equipping him with the skills, knowledge, and mindset to navigate the complex and often dangerous world of medieval Europe, embarking on his own unique knightly journey. No matter which path a newly knighted individual chose, whether to administer an estate, seek fortune abroad, or serve a powerful lord, the foundation for their future life was meticulously laid during their years as a squire. The legacy forged in those demanding adolescent years echoed through every decision, every battle, and every act of governance the knight would undertake, shaping not just a man, but an era. The comprehensive education received by a squire was designed to produce not merely soldiers, but leaders deeply integrated into the feudal, social, and spiritual fabric of medieval society. The physical conditioning from weapon and equestrian training ensured martial competence. The practical skills learned in the stable and forge fostered a profound understanding of logistics and resource management. The intellectual tutoring in literacy, law, and chivalric literature cultivated strategic thinking and adherence to a moral code. The rigorous social training honed etiquette and an understanding of hierarchical structures. And the deep spiritual immersion provided a vital ethical framework for a life often fraught with violence and difficult choices. Historical and sociological analyses confirm that the squire system was remarkably effective in perpetuating the knightly class and its values for centuries. It created a coherent, self-reinforcing culture that emphasized loyalty, honor, and service. Ideals, though often idealized, had tangible impacts on medieval governance and warfare. The resilience honed through physical hardship, the discipline instilled through constant regimen, and the leadership qualities nurtured in a subordinate role all contributed to the effectiveness and longevity of the knightly order. The echoes of the squire's resolve, his unwavering commitment to learning, enduring, and striving, resonated throughout his life as a knight. It was this profound, often brutal, and deeply formative upbringing that allowed them to navigate the complexities of medieval Europe, leaving a legacy that continues to fascinate and inform our understanding of this pivotal period in human history.